Hey there, Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, I've been getting more requests to cover Nick and his buds over at Unsubscribe Podcast, and this clip was shared with me. It's called Fat Electrician Debates History of Everything on Emperor Hirohito. Sweet, I hope it gets spicy. All right, make sure you are subscribed to the Unsubscribe Podcast. I'll link them down below. And give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. All right, let's get started. All right, as we're getting started here, I'm wondering what they're going to debate about. Is it maybe the role of Hirohito in World War II? They're going to debate his power, role in the ending, maybe with the bombs. I guess we'll find out. But let's see what we got.
Tell me about Emperor Hirohito. How do you feel about it?
Okay, Emperor Hirohito was. I mean, he was a goddamn puppet.
Controversial opinions.
I mean, he was
okay.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about Hirohito.
Oh, we're gonna fight.
Yeah, we probably will.
Disagree.
No. Here's the thing. He was.
Oh, wait. All right, so prediction then is History of Everything going to say, okay, he was a puppet, maybe of the military. Okay, could see that. They really ran things. The military really ran things, especially with like the Great Depression. Oddly, in Japan, the military gained more power during the Great Depression and like didn't phase them so much. But I'm assuming our buddy Fat Electrician, what he's saying, he's the ringleader of it. Hirohito. Okay, that's just what I'm thinking of.
Weak-willed as shit.
I disagree.
He was. No.
I agree.
He did, from every single documentation that comes out, he specifically did not want war. He did not want conflict. But once he signed up, once the whole military was into it, he basically was the weakest position you could have of, well, fuck it, might as well ball.
I disagree.
So I guess to back that up, then you're just going to have to say that it was like the military was just using him as a way to what? Like keep the will of the war going on because they're like, we don't want to sacrifice him. Or at the end, when they're saying really the last thing hanging up Japan from surrendering was his position. I wonder if Nick's going to come in and say, well, if he really wanted to end the war, he could have just surrendered earlier. We'll see. Okay, I'm excited because Nick's smiling over there. Check that out. He's like ready to pounce on him.
What do you mean? Explain that.
I completely think that he was complicit in the militarization of Japan the entire time.
The military do you have any idea what was going on over the course of after the first Sino-Japanese War heading into the period with Manchukuo?
Army, Navy competing, disobeying orders the entire time. I completely think that that's fabricated.
No.
100%.
Okay, what's
that? You ever
that?
read the book on it by Bix?
No.
He has an entire book basically saying that Hirohito orchestrated the entire thing and played it off like he didn't.
That everything afterwards would have been fabricated?
Yes.
I don't see that.
Hear me out. Look. Okay, so the entire argument is that he doesn't have power and he's a puppet of the Army and the Navy, right?
No, not that he is a puppet, is that he basically became that afterward. But because here's the thing.
That never happened in Japanese history.
Literally, that is the entire fucking thing for Japanese history. That is one of my big points.
Nobunaga is like, he was like one of the daimyos and everything.
The entire remember the role of, until the Meiji Restoration, at least it was supposed to, late 1800s, you've got a emperor that is virtually powerless when it comes to the politics and the military. Throughout Japanese history, they were very much a cultural, spiritual figurehead, pretty much working at behest of the shogun, who really runs the politics and the military of Japan, and did that for centuries.
Point of the Japanese emperorship throughout all of history. Do you have any idea how little power? Do you know when the last time the emperor actually had real fucking power in Japan was?
Defined as what?
720 AD with the Nara period.
Not according to the Japanese constitution during World War II.
Yeah, for what is supposed to happen. What is supposed to happen doesn't actually mean it fucking does.
I'm listening.
I love this.
And who determines the documentation on what did happen? All of the people that would have sworn to defend the emperor?
From the same people that tried to fucking coup and to keep the war going?
Right, but why would you coup a guy that didn't have any power in the first place? If he was just a puppet that had no power, why would you say, holy fuck, we gotta kill him to overthrow him?
Because if he makes a public announcement that's to the entirety of the people, that's the point.
So he's not powerless.
He is technically not.
Well, the thing is that the militarization and imperialism and the imperialist tendencies of Japan started before Hirohito, because History of Everything was trying to bring up, I think, a good point, which was about you know, like the militarism going back to the late 1900s. So after the Meiji Restoration and their rapid industrialization and buildup of their military in a very Western fashion, they started engaging in imperialist activities, especially with mainland Asia there, as they fought this, you know, Sino-Japanese War. So it's when they Japan defeated China, and then right after that, a decade later, defeating the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War. And so Hirohito, I mean, he would have like inherited a very militaristic one, and he is going to also inherit the throne because was it like mid-20s? The increased militarization of Japan was already going. So I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on Hirohito, and so I'm listening to these guys and want to see what they're going to point to as far as like evidence goes. I don't know the book necessarily that Fat Electrician's talking about, but I know about the historical context that History of Everything is talking about here. But we'll see. Let's continue.
The thing, but legally for what you'd be able to do, the amount of precedence that has to go into changing any single action within the government. It takes a lot more than that.
It sounds like he just needs to get on the radio and say what's up.
He needs to.
Exactly.
However, have you ever tried to get a Japanese person to say what it is that they actually fucking feel in a scenario instead of repressing it and holding it down?
So he was powerful.
Yes. And no, it's quantum fucking physics at this point with Hirohito.
It kind of sounds like you're just like, look.
Well, look, okay, so how much ability did Hirohito have to just, again, come on the mic and say, we're going to stop doing all this crap, and we're going to end the war, end the expansion, if you're talking about earlier in the war, or as the war was progressing and coming towards the end on the eve and both in the dawn of the atomic bombs, about him coming out instantly to sort of do this. Who really held the power for that? Or did Hirohito have to just come out at his own peril, on his own, to try to make, and to without the wishes of the military leadership, to come out and say, okay, we surrender?
I love this.
I could beat up my sister, but I'm not gonna.
Fight.
That's what it sounds like. Like, could I win this fight? Absolutely. I'm just not going to because I'm an okay person.
Okay. I love how the couple more non-history guys are just kind of like looking at this as like sports.
The final vote on whether or not Japan was going to surrender was cast by the only person that directly answered to Hirohito on the council. Mm-hmm. Hirohito decided to surrender.
Yes.
Okay.
Hirohito also sanctioned the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Okay, yes.
Okay, that's my whole point. He's way more powerful than everybody plays him off to be.
He was literally the sun god.
I understand that,
Okay.
but it's not a matter. Okay, look, when we're talking about this, it's not saying that he was completely fucking powerless. That's never the point.
Okay.
It's just that people either think in terms of absolutes, that he was either the one who's directly in control of everything or the one who could absolutely do nothing but sit by as a helpless puppet. There is no arguing that he was not complicit in all the shit.
It is interesting in a lot of ways, the irony of post-Meiji Restoration, where it's like a shift away from the, I shouldn't say shift away from the military. It was the shogun who commanded the military. But I guess you would say that now the emperor is more in control of that. But I mean, their whole like war council was so powerful. But I'll be honest, again, I still don't know exactly what Hirohito's influence was over that, over a guy like Tojo.
Okay.
That's the thing. The reason as to why he was let go in the first place was specifically because of a thing to save Japanese honor and also to make the occupation afterwards easier.
Right.
That is the entire purpose of why that was done and why he was spared.
Okay, we're close enough on being on the same page.
Exactly. Otherwise, he would have been tried. Because here's the thing. Just because you may have been forced into...
Because the others did. Okay, like Tojo and the whole crew, they had their own Nuremberg trials and they all went to death. Or at least were going to, if they don't, seppuku.
Thing, if someone gave you a gun and held a gun to your head and said, hey, kill this person, and you killed them, you still fucking killed them. You still committed murder when you could have tried to do something to get out of that.
Oh, I don't even think it was that bad.
No,
I think it was complete. I don't think they put a gun to his head.
I'm giving it as an example.
Was
right,
the
no, for
Pope
sure. I was saying,
complicit
like-
in the Crusades? Like,
Actually, yes. Fuck yes. You kidding me with the first one? The Pope directly as
He really knows medieval.
I say this as a person.
Yeah.
Chase, zoom
Hold
in
on, I'm
on,
going to go back.
Actually, yes. Fuck yes.
No, for sure. I was saying,
complicit
like,
in the Crusades? Like,
Yeah.
actually,
Yes.
Fuck yes. You kidding me with the first one?
Yeah, he called it. Yeah, I don't know if he knew. I don't know if I forget all their names, but the guy in the white shirt. Yeah, I mean, the Pope called for it. With the emperor or the Byzantine emperor coming out saying, "Hey, well, Pope, we need your help. Bring your boys over." And Pope was like, "I got you, fam. Let's go."
The Pope directly as
He really knows medieval.
I say this as a person.
Chase, zoom in on my face right
I say this as a person, born and raised Catholic. All right. From the first Pope to call a crusade, specifically the action
Pope
done
Urban II.
in an effort to strengthen relations and ties with French nobility
Right.
and garner power around himself to secure his own position within Italy and also the power of the papacy.
And I need to add there a big motivation too is regain authority over the East. The official split, the Great Schism, happened about 50 years before this, and the Pope was virtually powerless in Eastern Europe, where the Crusades were going on, and who had been fighting in the Crusades.
I think he was countering Islamic influence across Europe.
He was,
Yeah.
because
That was
guess
already
what?
gone.
Here's the thing that bothers me with
That,
history.
that ended with the Battle of Tours long before that, but
Happens with a lot of people. It's not fucking black and white. No matter what
Yes, it
anyone
is.
says in this here,
It is.
it's multiple levels of grays that overlap. And so someone can do something for guess what?
Oh, you're the best.
Multiple fucking reasons.
Yeah,
Oh, man,
I
I
would say
love-
that's objectively
So,
good.
I get on the Hirohito argument because I always end up getting stuck on arguing with people on the internet about the atomic bombing of Japan. And the amount of misinformation that people
Yeah.
fucking believe about that dumb shit. Like the amount of people that believe that Japan tried to surrender beforehand and we said no just because we wanted to do it for funsies is fucking insane.
No, because what they offered was not even a
Unconditional.
surrender.
No,
they offered a white piece,
Yeah,
basically.
hey,
That's not a fucking surrender.
Do you guys want to stop and we're going to keep all of the government that just tried to take over the world completely intact?
usually the argument's more not necessarily about the surrender thing, because you're talking about a cultural interpretation of surrender that's, the Japanese militarism isn't going to identify with as much, due to their history, right? You don't do that. But the argument I hear more is that Japan was already defeated, meaning they were powerless at that time. So essentially the war was already over.
And
We just
most
wanna-
of the
we just wanna
land
pause.
as well. Let's not
Right,
forget
yeah.
that. It wasn't even just keep our current regime. It was basically, this is the guy in the middle of the boxing match, pressed up into a corner, arms broken in 3 different places, blood pouring out of an eye, and going, I think we're in an equal
wanna call it a
position.
draw?
We could call it a draw.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Japan again was not a peaceful. This is a warrior
no.
society
No.
at this point, like a warrior society,
Sure.
which the ideology, which I think Americans have a really hard
the
time.
same
It
peop-
is what is it is like kamikaze suicide.
It
Like
was
that
imperialist.
that is normal.
It was imperialist. Everybody likes to make that like synonymous with like Western European culture, but like Japan was 100% imperialist trying to take over the fucking planet.
and they were doing a fantastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. They had the greater sphere of East Asia or whatever, right? They wanted to, what they say was protect, basically unify all of Asia against Western imperialism. That was their goal. And shoot, they got pretty close to it. But when you talk about ruling over the Asian population of the planet, then you get into like interesting like Kaiserreich ideas is, what was going to go on after that. So like, let's say they win, Japan, Germany win World War II, and you have these two ideologies. Do they end up basically just dividing the world, kind of like Man in the High Castle, where you have, that part and this part. So you got essentially like the white people ruled by Germany, the exception of like Western United States, but I guess they would see that about a buffer zone, but then Japan ruling over, Asian people, and then everyone else is just going to be divided up like Africa and
It was a hyper-militarized. It's almost what would happen if you combined, let's say that you combine Spanish colonialism with Prussian militarization. That is the closest thing that I could possibly associate with it, because their entire ideology behind it was, we want to be a member of the big boys, being the colonizers. They wanted to do that, but that was the whole idea behind the East Asian co-prosperity sphere. They were the biggest brother that was going to be taking care of all the little Asian brothers.
The big irony, of course, was how brutal they were. Look at what happens with China, everywhere else, with how the Japanese treated them. That's where it's hard to say what were they protecting by, the slaughter of so many people.
And that was their point. So everyone else was going to be subservient. They were all going to be one big happy family, but we're the big fucking brother. And just so you know, if you mouth off to the big brother, you get popped.
But there was incredible amount of like racism within the whole Japanese ideology with that as well, because these other people were not seen as equals to the Japanese under how they saw it. Yeah, it might be big brother, little brother, but it's like you really beat up your little brother hardcore for not much in the way of gain.
That very brutally popped.
Yeah,
and they controlled how much? They controlled the most.
Yeah, they controlled. If you go by geographical landmass
More than
and
Rome in its
territory,
height.
it was. I think it's the biggest empire that's ever existed.
No.
British.
Mongolia.
Other than Mongolia.
I think
So,
I
so
think-
it's close.
I think the stat they're taking into consideration was like
Oh,
sea rights.
okay. Land consideration versus human population. I'm gonna say British Empire, but yeah, Mongolia, land-based, sure.
Shit too.
That doesn't.
that doesn't count.
Granted,
Because
it's like-
otherwise you
If that though, when you're just talking about land-based, I mean, are you talking about like, okay, I guess all of Canada? Anyway.
It's ocean.
Listen, if you want to count the sea rights, the British Empire at its f***ing height would beat that fucking ass out by a million miles.
Well, there was a giant sense of racial superiority too. I don't know if
That
this
never
came
went
up.
away.
Yes, there was.
That never went away
No,
either.
I know. I don't know if it came up. But yeah, the Japanese considered themselves racially superior to all the rest of the Asians who we were talking about. It's the big brother. Or
Hence the biggest brother. They were the ones who were on top.
The consensual sex of Nanking.
No, there's like this really funny short of I don't know if he's like
Wow.
a Japanese historian or whatever, but he's like in the traditional Japanese like robe
Donut operator.
formal outfit. And it's like it's the snippet of Joe Rogan on his podcast explaining that the Japanese were such this badass warrior culture that the Mongols showed up and the Japanese fucked them up and they left. And it just cuts to this Japanese like historian dude laughing hysterically.
Yeah,
He's
that
like,
didn't
"No,
happen.
bro, it was a typhoon. It
was
every time.
Their navy was destroyed. Their ships were destroyed. Yeah, and it happened twice, 10 years apart.
Three typhoons. Point of interdiction here. It was both.
Okay.
Because the fucking thing is, they did actually make landfall, and there
Yeah.
were multiple
Yes, they
battles
did.
on land.
They did.
Here's the problem. Yes,
Literally.
There was,
Tsushima.
not even just Tsushima. They landed on the mainland.
too.
They did. Not the epicenter cities, though, but, fringes.
They did fight battles.
Of
Here's
the
the, here's
South.
the fucking problem. So this is the whole thing when you actually look at Japanese history and the whole point with how the samurai were structured in the first place. So the samurai fought in almost the same way that the Mongols did at that time. They were horse archers.
Right.
That's what they were. The
Right.
whole sword is bullshit in the first place. Like the sword was never actually the common weapon. It
was
the
very
spirit
rarely
of the
used.
I mean, they
Mongol.
had
Well,
it.
no, with the
They had them, but yeah, there's especially, horseman archers.
bow being the number one, and that is what they utilize. It's why if you look at old samurai armor, they have these gigantic pads. Think of like a football pads on steroids, where they're just gigantic squares that are right here. And the whole purpose of that is to block arrows.
Right.
As I, while riding a horse, point back here, I have a giant square shield.
And they
on
had a
my
lot of
shoulder that's
mobility.
protecting my face, and that's the whole point. So they're fighting the Mongols with almost the same type of tactics against. It's honestly not Mongols at that point. It's mass Korean levies that have been forced into the battlefield by the Mongols, but they win.
That's how the Mongol military
The
works.
samurai government almost immediately after this fucking collapses from winning. Do you know why it collapses after they win? Because their entire society was based off winning not only honor, but money and land after winning a battle.
Yeah, it's like when your team wins a
don't
Super
get
Bowl.
new land after winning a defensive battle. So what ends up happening is that all the samurai go,
I'll be quiet here because I have not heard this take. This is actually really interesting. Okay, because I didn't think about that part of the cultural aspect of a warrior culture.
well, the fuck did we fight and die for? We didn't get any new lands or anything. We get to loot
to
some of the dead
live.
bodies, but that's it. And so they rebel against the government and take it over.
God, I love it. True.
Because they didn't get any land.
I got 4 skulls.
It's somewhat like it's like an illogical position though. It's like, well, what do you want? Like, did you want to either, okay, if that was the goal, then would you rather have surrendered, or are you saying like the Japanese should have done like a counterattack, onto the mainland? That's not something Japanese did. Japan was about closing themselves off for the most part, being self-sufficient. I shouldn't say closing themselves off, not as much as what's going to happen in the early 17th century with the Tokugawa, but.
They didn't bring gold here because you're not traveling with anything of merit. You're just coming to take everything.
Most of the treasure and fleet and whatnot went down to the bottom of the fucking ocean from the typhoon. They didn't have anything worth taking.
And Mongols, I know you've done like different beats on it, which we will get into it because it's one of my favorite pieces of history. Like Mongols didn't give a fuck about like property or any of that shit. They were a roaming tribe. They're the steppe people.
At least in the beginning, yes.
Yeah. When it was Genghis, like Genghis was very big, and then
Well, they became like trade obsessed afterwards. That's one thing they're going to do and it's why they also invested so heavily in the expansion and buildup of the Silk Road because they could tax it that way. But yeah, it's a different system that I guess what you would traditionally think about wealth and imperialism that way. But I mean, it was supposed to be basically all people unified under one sky. It's kind of the policy of Genghis Khan.
the generations fucked that up. But when they went to Japan, it was just like, hey, conquer shit. Conquer shit.
Kill.
That's why I care so much about the misunderstanding of the power that Hirohito had, because
He brings it back.
You're kind of looking at it as like Jeff Bezos is in control of Amazon, but also there's like 800 people below him making decisions that he never actually gets to see.
No. That's still associating too much. Here's the thing. No. What you're saying from my belief, that's too harsh and definitive of a stance. Here's the thing. Again, I say that he was a guy who ended up being used. He is not innocent in this. I have never made a statement that he is in that sense. In fact, he ended up getting away with a lot of the stuff that he was complicit in, allowed or ordered otherwise, that may or may not be able to be proven.
He got off so easy there. Neither of them have really talked about what led to the modern iteration of the militarization of Japan. And it trace it back to so the Tokugawa, they locked down the country, early 1600s. Fast forward, it's mid 1800s. The Americans show up. Commodore Matthew Perry shows up, forces them open, and they get this glance of the outside world. And they see firsthand, and they've seen this. They saw this before, like on the eve of the closing up of Japan. So like 1500s, they saw what was going on with Europe in Asia. So 1500s, the Spanish, the Portuguese, with these incredible amount of this modern technology when it comes to warfare. You got guns coming in. The Japanese actually thought that stuff was cool at first, but they saw how such of a threat that the Europeans were, and they close up their borders, except to, the Dutch for some trade missions here and there. But then fast forward to the 1850s, and all of a sudden, that like Europe that was just peeking its head has become, the Western world, because we're talking about the US, I should say, as a whole, is now like on steroids. 1800s, this is where we're starting to get like Maxim machine guns coming in, and the steamships, and this incredible amount of military technology at that point. And you see it with the Meiji Restoration, was we have to militarize in a similar like Western fashion, or we're going to go the way of what's happening to everybody else in Asia at that point. China's been exploited. The Philippines, look at the Spanish did centuries before that, to them. That like motivated it. It was like, get on track with the Westerners and become that imperial juggernaut, or you're going to be victim of it. I think that is one of the biggest benchmarks that we have of this. And this is something that Hirohito would have inherited, that had already been going on for well over a generation.
The thing is, he did not have as much power to organize how things were done on the ground and for specific actions that led to as many war crimes. Because here's the thing, he can say, hey, I'm going to pull the trigger. And then after pulls the trigger, the fucking person controlling the bullet ends up splitting it off into 3 different directions and going after an orphanage. Okay. That's my point, is that the generals and those underneath were significantly worse than anything he ever had in mind.
It's like the idea.
Well, same thing. You could put him in the same category then, Hirohito, of the Japanese population being possibly ignorant to some of the atrocities that were going on. Because remember, the Japanese government didn't even accept that stuff. And people, the general Japanese population, some of them went to their grave at old age after the war, not believing in the atrocities that actually went down there.
Idea of like, hey, yes, you can attack China, but then the repercussions of that.
Then they turn it into the competition of 100 heads.
Yes. Okay.
We're still close enough.
Brutal story, by the way.
I'm happy with it. Everybody plays it off like he was literally like, everybody plays it off like he was fucking off in the corner playing with koi fish and had no clue what was going on whatsoever.
There's no way.
It's my argument. That's what upsets me. Is when everybody was like, he was literally just like, a halfway disabled kid playing with koi fish in his pond in his palace, and he didn't know anything.
No, he's a 5'2"
Okay,
fucking
good. We're close enough to being on the same page. But that's why I care so much about, like, no, he had way more power than you think, and he was complicit, and he's a big part of the reason that they didn't agree to surrender at Japan earlier, because the last stipulation before them surrendering, that because they kept like lowering their expectations for surrender like 3 or 4 times, and then finally the last stipulation was, okay, well, you can't try the emperor for war crimes. And then we're like, okay, fuck it, fine. And that was it. That was the surrender. So like, that's my whole point of like, well, if he was truly nothing all along, why the fuck would that even be on the table?
Spiritual importance. Again, it is actually a big thing, even if he was responsible for a lot more, is spiritual importance, because
that's always been the case.
That he made that speech for the people because he was revered as a god.
A living god. That's the whole point.
A lot of Japanese citizens, a lot of Japanese citizens had never heard his voice. Like they did.
Never.
They dressed
no
up.
one did.
No one did. That was the first time it had ever been on radio.
Well, you don't even see him either, by the way. Being the presence, like physical presence, was such a big deal.
Ever. No one outside of the immediate government that was right there had ever heard his voice.
Blow his mind in a minute.
That is essentially like for America. It's like Jesus coming over the radio and be like,
it was literally
hey,
like,
we giving up, and everyone's like,
well, I was gonna say, people knew the radio transmission was coming. They were dressed up like they were like the equivalent of going to church. Like people were dressed up like the formal occasion just to hear the emperor's voice over the radio. It was kind of crazy.
All right, that was a fun conversation to see them have. And it actually seems like they came to some consolation a little bit, because it seemed like both of them started on more extremes about what the power, was of the emperor, but then they kind of understand it's maybe somewhere in the middle there. And they both did make up, they did both make good points. I did think there was only a little bit of historical context potentially missing. History of Everything was able to put in a little bit that. Hopefully you heard, again, a little bit more about, like the opening of Japan and the effect that is going to have on their militarism, because that's a huge part of this that wasn't really discussed there. But it is something I need to learn a little bit more about what, when it comes to like day-to-day operations of the Japanese imperial actions, what role did the emperor play? That's actually something I want to know a lot more of. So I need to look at some sources. If you got any, you can let me know. Let me know in the comments. Come over on Discord. And what's kind of the best, most reliable stuff we have about the actual command structure there, outside of the just war council and what we think about with these military leaders. Anyway, all right, that was a lot of fun, and thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you all next time.